The loan officer arrived at 7:15 a.m. on a Tuesday in March 1984. Jim Carlson was halfway through morning milking when he saw the sedan pull up outside the barn. The automated system was running its usual cycle. 48 Holstein cows moving through the parlor at exactly the intervals the manufacturer had programmed. 6 minutes per cow, computer-timed, efficient. The numbers had looked solid in 1981. Milk prices were stable at $13.50 per hundredweight. The automated system would increase production from 940,000 pounds annually to 1,450,000 pounds. The efficiency gain would pay for itself in 4 years. After that, pure profit. The bank liked the projection, approved the loan at 9.5% over 10 years. Monthly payments of $630. 3 years later, everything had changed. Milk prices had dropped to $12.10 per hundredweight. The loan's variable rate had climbed to 16%. Monthly payments were now $2,800. Production had increased exactly as promised, but revenue hadn't kept pace with debt service. Jim had tried renegotiating in December. The bank said rates were rates. Tried again in January. They suggested increasing production. By February, he'd missed 3 payments. The notices started arriving. Legal language about default and security interests and creditor rights. The officer carried a clipboard and a court order. He didn't apologize. Didn't need to. The paperwork was clear. 3 months of missed payments, multiple extension requests denied. The bank was exercising its security interest in collateral item 7B. Automated milking system, installed October 1981, finance value $127,000. Jim knew it was coming. He'd received the notices, made the calls, explained the situation to people who understood the numbers, but not the biology. Cows don't stop producing milk because interest rates climb. They don't pause lactation while you negotiate payment terms. The loan officer was maybe 30, probably had a business degree, definitely had never milked a cow. He stood in the parlor watching the automated system work, stainless steel gleaming, computers humming, the kind of precision that looked expensive because it was. "We'll have a crew here this afternoon," he said. "Disconnection should take 4 to 6 hours. Jim asked about operational transition. The officer looked confused. "The cows," Jim said. "They're still producing." "That's not really our concern. We're here for the collateral." It was technically true. The bank had lent money secured by equipment. The equipment wasn't performing its financial function. Retrieve the equipment. The cows were Jim's problem, not theirs. Institutional lending doesn't account for biological externalities. The system shut down mid-cycle at 9:30 a.m. A technician the bank brought disconnected the vacuum lines, powered down the computers, began dismantling the stainless steel infrastructure that had transformed the Carlson dairy from a small operation into a mid-sized competitor. By noon, the milking parlor was empty. Just concrete floors and mounting brackets where the automated equipment had been. 48 cows were due for evening milking in 6 hours. Their udders were already filling. The biological clock doesn't stop because the financial one runs out. Jim stood in the empty parlor. His wife Sarah came in, looked at the bare walls, said what they were both thinking. "We still have cows?" The math was brutal and immediate. 48 cows, twice daily milking. Manual milking averages 8 minutes per cow under optimal conditions. That's 384 minutes, 6 hours and 24 minutes, twice a day, 12 hours and 48 minutes of labor just to extract what the automated system had handled in 3 hours. And that assumed they had equipment that could actually do it. The automated system wasn't the first milking setup the Carlson farm had used. Jim's father had started the dairy in 1963 with a simple bucket milking system, portable units, carrying milk by hand. That lasted until 1969, when he'd installed a surge pipeline system, stainless steel lines running overhead, vacuum pump in a separate room. The milk flowed directly from cow to bulk tank. No carrying, no spillage. Modern for its time. That system had run reliably for 12 years. When the automated parlor was installed in 1981, the dealer asked if they wanted the old equipment removed. Jim's father had said no. Might need parts someday. So they disconnected it, drained the lines, covered the milking units, pushed the vacuum pump into a corner of the equipment barn. Sarah found it in the back of the equipment barn. The old surge pipeline system, vacuum pump, stainless steel pipeline, individual milking units with inflation assemblies. It had been sitting under tarps for almost 3 years, dust-covered, disconnected, but intact. The system was primitive compared to what the bank had just taken. No computers, no automatic detachment, no individual cow tracking or feed dispensing, just vacuum pressure and mechanical timing. The kind of system 10,000 American dairy farms had used before automation became the standard. Jim pulled the covers off, checked the vacuum pump. The motor housing was solid, no visible rust. The intake filter was clogged with dust, but replaceable. He flipped the power switch. Nothing happened. The electrical had been disconnected when they installed the new system. He spent 2 hours tracing wires through the barn, found the junction box where they'd capped the feed lines, reconnected them, checked the breaker panel, reset the circuits, went back to the vacuum pump. At 2:30 p.m., the vacuum pump started, loud, rougher than he remembered. The bearings had sat still for 3 years. They'd need lubrication, breaking in. But the motor ran, the pump spun, vacuum pressure built slowly, the gauge climbed. 10 inches of mercury, 12, 14. The system needed 15 inches for proper milk extraction. The gauge stopped at 14. 2, close enough to test. Sarah started cleaning the milking units. 3 years of dust and barn grime. The inflation assemblies were dried out. Rubber loses elasticity when it sits unused. The shells would crack under vacuum pressure, but they had 6 units stored away. Spares from the old system, she found them in the parts cabinet, still in original packaging. Jim's father had bought extras during a sale in 1978. Never used them, never threw them out. They installed the spare inflations, connected the units to the pipeline, opened the vacuum valves. The inflations collapsed properly, rhythm looked correct. The mechanical pulse was still timed right. By 4 p.m., they had 6 milking units operational. Not the 12 the automated system had run, not the simultaneous 6-cow capacity, but functional. The cows could be milked, not efficiently, not optimally, but biologically. The cows came in for evening milking, confused. They knew the routine. Enter the parlor, position in the stall, wait for the automated system to attach. 6 minutes. Exit. The sensors would detect completion. The units would detach automatically. Feed would dispense as reward. The whole process was choreographed. But the automated system was gone. The stalls were different. Jim and Sarah were there instead, manually attaching milking units, monitoring each cow by sight, manually detaching when milk flow stopped. No sensors, no automation, just observation and judgment. The first cow took 14 minutes. Jim hadn't hand-milked in 3 years. The technique came back slowly. Attach the unit. Watch the milk flow through the sight glass. Judge when production slows. Detach before the cow gets uncomfortable. The automated system had done all of that through pressure sensors and computer timing. The second cow took 11 minutes. The third took 9. By the 10th cow, they had the rhythm closer to 8 minutes. Still slower than automation. Still manual, but workable. 48 cows took 7 hours and 12 minutes. They finished at 11:47 p.m. Jim's back hurt. His shoulders ached. Sarah had blisters on both hands from connecting and disconnecting the inflation assemblies. 3 years of automated milking had made them soft. The manual work was harder than either remembered, but the milk tank had volume. The cows had been milked. The biological imperative had been met. The next morning started at 4 a.m. The cows were uncomfortable. 12-hour intervals are too long. The automated system had run on precise 8-hour cycles. The old system couldn't match that frequency. Not with manual labor, not with just 2 people. Milk production started dropping immediately, not catastrophically, not in ways that would kill the operation overnight, just steady erosion of output that made every number harder. The automated system had optimized everything. Computer-tracked feed dispensing timed to each cow's production cycle. Milking intervals calculated to maximize output without stressing the animals. Individual cow monitoring that caught health issues before they became production problems. The system had cost $127,000, but it had delivered quantifiable return. Each cow under automation had averaged 62 pounds of milk daily. That's 2,276 pounds per cow annually. 48 cows produced 142,848 pounds per year. At $12, 10 per hundredweight, that was $17,284 annual revenue from the herd. The old system was just extraction, no optimization, no precision timing, no health monitoring. The cows produced less. Each cow's daily output fell from 62 pounds to 48 pounds, a 22% decline. Now each cow produced 2,304 pounds annually. The herd total dropped to 192 pounds. Revenue fell to $13,382. That's $3,302 less annual income. The monthly payment on the loan had been $2,800. They'd been underwater before. Now they were drowning. Jim ran the numbers at the kitchen table. Production costs hadn't changed. Feed, utilities, veterinary care, property costs, all fixed. Labor had actually increased. 3 people working 12 hours daily versus the automated system running itself. The margin was negative. Not survivable long-term, but the loan was gone. The equipment was gone. The monthly payment of $2,100 had vanished with the collateral. The reduced income was less than the automated income minus debt service. They were cash flow positive for the first time in 4 months. Not profitable, not sustainable, but operational. The bank followed procedure. They'd seized collateral, standard practice in agricultural lending when borrowers default. The loan had been clear. The equipment was security. The paperwork was legal. Nobody had done anything wrong in the narrow sense of contract law. But contract law doesn't milk cows. Jim called the bank 3 days after the seizure, asked to speak with the loan officer, got voicemail, left a message. Called again the next day, got transferred twice, finally reached someone on day 5. He explained the situation. Production was down. Income would follow. The payment plan they'd rejected last month was now mathematically impossible with reduced output. The farm was operating at 77% capacity. Revenue had dropped 23%. The restructuring he'd proposed in February, payments of $100 monthly based on reduced milk prices, was now optimistic. He could manage maybe $800 monthly. Maybe. The officer listened, said something about the bank's position, risk management, fiduciary responsibility to depositors, the language of institutional lending, credit committees, regulatory oversight, asset classifications, the vocabulary that turns farms into line items. Then he said the part that mattered. We can discuss restructuring once you demonstrate stable production capacity. Stable production capacity. With what system? The old surge setup kept running. The vacuum pump developed a bearing noise on day 5. High-pitched whine during operation. Jim pulled the pump apart, found the problem. Bearing race was scored, dry. The 3 years of storage without lubrication had damaged it. He drove to the agricultural supply store, ordered a replacement, cost $47, installed it himself. The pump ran quieter. The inflation assemblies started wearing out on day 12. Rubber fatigue. The vacuum pressure cycles stressed the material. Cracks developed. Milking efficiency dropped. Jim ordered replacements from the surge parts catalog. 6 complete assemblies. Cost $216. Installed them during evening milking. Production stabilized. The motor brushes wore out on day 23. Common failure on motors that sit idle then restart under load. Jim could see the spark discharge during operation, pulled the motor, replaced the brushes, cost $31, simple repair, 2 hours of work. Total maintenance over 3 weeks, $294. Maintenance on the automated system had averaged $340 per month under the service contract. Parts and labor included. When something broke, a technician came, usually within 8 hours. The system was designed to be maintained by professionals. Proprietary components, specialized tools, computer diagnostics. The contract was mandatory. The dealer wouldn't sell the system without it. The old system was designed to be maintained by farmers. Every part had a part number. Every component was standardized. Bearings were standard industrial sizes. Motors use common brush assemblies. Inflation units were agricultural commodity items. Any farmer with basic mechanical knowledge could service it. The system had been engineered in 1960s manufacturing philosophy. Repair, don't replace. Fix what breaks. Keep it running. Sarah started helping with every milking. Their son Michael, home from community college for spring break, picked up shifts, then stayed, dropped the semester. The farm needed him more than he needed economics classes that explained why his family's operation was failing. 3 people working, still taking 6 hours twice daily. The farm's labor cost quadrupled. Milk production remained 22% below pre-seizure levels. But the cows were being milked. The bulk tank was filling. The milk truck came every other day. Revenue was coming in. Not enough. Not sustainable indefinitely. But actual money from actual production. The bank held the automated system for 6 weeks, listed it for sale as used equipment, posted ads in agricultural trade publications, contacted equipment dealers, found no buyers. The 1984 dairy market was collapsing across the Midwest, not just in their county, regionally, nationally. Milk prices had fallen 31% since 1981. Interest rates on farm loans had climbed from 9% to 16%. Banks were foreclosing. Equipment dealers were repossessing machinery faster than they could auction it. Farm sales were happening weekly, entire operations liquidating. Nobody was buying $127,000 milking systems. Nobody had $127,000. The banks that might lend it were too busy seizing other equipment to finance new purchases. The market for specialized dairy automation had evaporated. The system sat in the bank's repossession warehouse, taking up space, accruing storage fees, depreciating. The bank's books listed it at finance value minus 3 years of payments. Call it $98,000. Market value was maybe $40,000 if they could find a buyer, which they couldn't. Meanwhile, the Carlson dairy kept operating. Reduced capacity, higher labor costs, lower margins, but operational. Milk was being produced. Revenue was being generated. Small payments could be made. In May, the loan officer called. Different tone than March. Less procedural. More conversational. Said the bank was willing to discuss options. Could Jim come in for a meeting? Jim went. Drove the 12 miles to town, parked in the bank lot, walked past the lobby where he'd signed the original loan documents in 1981. Different world then, different assumptions. The officer had a restructuring proposal, extended terms, reduced monthly payments, acknowledgement that 1984 dairy economics weren't 1981 dairy economics, a workout plan that accepted reduced revenue as the new baseline. The proposal included returning the automated system. Jim said no. The officer looked genuinely confused. You don't want the equipment back? We're milking with the old system. That system is inefficient. That system isn't financed? The officer started to respond, then stopped. The calculation was visible on his face, working through the implications. The automated system was producing nothing for anyone. The old system was producing revenue for the Carlsons and potential loan payments for the bank. Efficiency didn't matter if the efficient equipment was sitting in a warehouse. The officer tried a different approach. The automated system would restore your production capacity and restore monthly payments I can't make. We've reduced the payment in this proposal. To $1,640, I can manage $800. The officer looked at the spreadsheet. That doesn't cover the interest at current rates. Current rates are 16% on equipment that's sitting in your warehouse. You're not collecting interest on it there either. The leverage was becoming clear. The bank wanted the loan performing, wanted the asset off their books, wanted the situation resolved. But returning the system meant acknowledging it had value. And if it had value sufficient to secure a loan, why had they seized it? If it wasn't valuable enough to sell, why was the loan still calculated at financed value? The internal logic of institutional lending was eating itself. Jim offered a counter-proposal. Keep the automated system. Write down the loan principal to realistic market value of the seized equipment. Call it $40,000. Restructure what's left around current production capacity. Calculate payments based on what the old system could realistically generate with current milk prices and labor costs. The officer said he'd need to discuss it with the credit committee. Translation: The credit committee needed to decide if taking a $58,000 write-down on a non-performing loan was better than holding a $98,000 non-performing loan backed by unsellable equipment. 3 weeks later, they signed new terms. The loan principal was reduced by $45,000. Compromise. The bank wouldn't write down the full $58,000 Jim had proposed. Credit committees have their limits, but $45,000 was enough. The remaining balance was restructured over 15 years at 12% interest. Still higher than the original loan. Still painful, but manageable. Monthly payments dropped from $2,100 to $890. The automated system remained bank property, technically an asset, practically worthless. It would sit in that warehouse for another 2 years before being auctioned for $18,000 to a dairy in Wisconsin. The bank would take a total loss of $80,000 on the original $127,000 loan. The Carlson farm kept operating with the old surge pipeline system. Jim walked out of that meeting understanding something he hadn't understood in 1981. Leverage cuts both ways. The bank had leveraged him with debt. He'd leveraged them with operational independence. The automated system had made him efficient but dependent. The old system made him inefficient but autonomous. Autonomy beats efficiency when efficiency is conditional on someone else's patience. The story spread through the county. Other dairy farmers were facing the same crisis. Automated systems financed during optimistic years. Payments based on milk prices that no longer existed. Interest rates that had doubled. Banks seizing equipment. Farms shutting down. But the Carlsons were still milking. Tom Henderson stopped by in June. His automated system was 3 months behind on payments. The bank was sending notices. "How'd you manage it?" he asked. Jim showed him the old surge system, explained the negotiation, the key point. "They took our most efficient equipment, but efficiency belongs to whoever owns it. The old system is ours." Henderson nodded slowly. "You still have the old equipment?" "In the barn, under tarps." Most farms did. Automation hadn't meant throwing out the old systems, just disconnecting them, replacing them, storing them in case. Nobody had thought in case would mean seizure. They'd thought it meant breakdown, temporary failure, not institutional reclamation. By August, 4 other dairy farms in the county had negotiated similar deals. Let the banks keep the automated systems they'd seized or were threatening to seize. Restructure loans around old equipment capacity, lower payments, longer terms, survival instead of efficiency. The farms that had thrown out their old systems were the ones that closed. The Carlson dairy operated on the old surge system for 3 years. Milk production stayed at reduced levels. Labor costs remained high. Profit margins were thin. But the farm remained operational. The cows got milked. The bills got paid. The loan got serviced. In 1987, milk prices started recovering. Not to 1980 levels. Not to break even with the old optimistic projections, but enough. Jim replaced the old surge system with a new automated setup, not top of the line, mid-range, functional. He paid cash, no financing. The cost was $73,000, less than the bank had written off on the original system. The old surge system went back under tarps in the equipment barn. Jim didn't throw it out. Sarah asked why he was keeping it. Because it still works. She understood, not sentimental, not nostalgic, just practical. The old system had bought them negotiating leverage when the new system became a liability. It had converted institutional leverage into operational resilience. It had given them options when options were the difference between survival and foreclosure. The dairy ran profitably from 1987 forward. The loan from 1984 was paid off in 1999. The automated system installed in 1987 ran until 2003, then was replaced with another cash purchase. The Carlson farm never financed equipment again. The old surge system sat in the equipment barn until 2019, when Jim's grandson cleaned out the facility. He asked if they should scrap it. Jim was 78, retired. The dairy had been sold to a regional cooperative. He looked at the old system, dusty, obsolete, worthless by any current measure. "Keep it," he said. His grandson didn't understand. "Nobody uses these anymore. Nobody thinks they'll need to." The lesson wasn't about rejecting modernization, The automated system in 1981 had been the right choice. It had tripled production capacity, made the farm competitive. The problem wasn't the equipment, it was the financing structure. Borrowing against optimistic projections, assuming stable prices, betting the entire operation on continued growth. Modernization isn't the problem. Overexposure is. The 1984 farm crisis destroyed thousands of American dairy operations. High interest rates, falling milk prices, aggressive loan enforcement. The farmers who survived weren't the ones who rejected technology. They were the ones who had redundancy, backup systems, operational flexibility when primary systems failed or were taken. Efficiency collapses when the system owning it collapses. The bank that seized the Carlson milking system was following legal procedure. The loan officers were doing their jobs. The credit committees were protecting institutional interests. Nobody was villainous, but the system was structured to optimize efficiency over resilience, to value growth over stability, to assume continuous operation of financed assets. Cows don't care about institutional assumptions. They produce milk on biological schedules. They need to be milked whether the equipment is paid off or repossessed. The old system wasn't efficient, but it was owned. And ownership gave Jim Carlson something the automated system couldn't provide: the ability to say no. The bank wanted their loan to perform, wanted the situation resolved, wanted to clear the non-performing asset from their books. Jim had what they needed. Not because his farm was successful, not because he'd outmaneuvered them, but because he had equipment that worked and wasn't leveraged. Negotiating power comes from alternatives. The American dairy industry modernized successfully over the following decades. Automated systems became standard. Robotics, computer monitoring, precision feeding. The technology was genuine improvement. The farms that adopted it weren't wrong, but the survivors were the ones who maintained operational capacity independent of debt service, the ones who kept something that still worked. If stories about leverage, resilience, and preparation matter to you, subscribe, because sometimes survival doesn't come from what you buy, it comes from what you kept.